Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we have a special guest. Gabriel Shaw is a kinesiologist, exercise physiologist, and Tai Chi instructor who helps people find balance and ease by moving through stress and trauma stored as tension in their bodies. So please welcome Gabriel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot for having me on, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, great. Well, let's just dive in and tell us how your story and your journey to becoming a kinesiologist and physiologist and Tai Chi instructor.
Sure, definitely. So when I was a kid, I was very obsessed with martial arts, and sometimes young boys are. And so when I was in my early teens, about 12, 13 years old, with another friend, we started in a Kung Fu school.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Kung Fu school, they also taught Tai Chi and Qigong as like a small part of what they did in that Kung Fu school. And I was also always raised with a strong sense of spirituality and discipline and spiritual seeking values in my family, coming from a very religious family. And but then, as a very kind of rebellious young person rebelling against those ideals and wanting to see what else is out there, I really kind of used my fascination about the martial arts and also my intrinsic desire for spiritual seeking to really dive a lot more heavily into the Tai Chi and Qigong aspect than I ever did the Kung Fu. And, I did that Kung Fu style for, 10 years after that, but it's really diving into what we call the internal arts, or the healing aspect of the martial arts, the Tai Chi, the Qigong, and related disciplines, breathing techniques and things like that I found just added a lot more depth and meaning to the practice. And so I was always really drawn to those and studied those a lot, with a lot of Taoist teachings and Buddhist teachings and yoga and other things that come along with that path. And then in my early 20s, as a desire to use those skills to help people more, I decided to become a paramedic. And so I went to paramedic school and, wanted to, as you try to do in your 20s, is develop some skills and develop those skills. And that was really powerful for me because I really learned my passion for service and helping others. And that's going to be similar to a lot of clients that I work with that have this call to help others. But I also realized that my calling in paramedicine was going to be not that sustainable. It was going to be short-lived because I could just sense, having gone through some significant trauma myself as a first responder, I could see the negative impacts that was starting to have on my psychology, and was lucky to be exposed to some people that helped me get educated on the negative impact that had on the psychology and the health and the relationships of some of my colleagues. And also wanted to make a little bit more preventative impact as well in the population, and also wanted to combine some of my knowledge of movement and martial arts and health from that side and spirituality with my understanding of Western medicine and, from the paramedic side of things, working at the hospital. And that's what drove me to go to school to become a kinesiologist, an exercise physiologist. A desire to combine those things, a desire to combine the physical and mental and spiritual health avenues together. And that's what I do now. And in my sessions, I help people understand the psychological, emotional underlying to a lot of their pain. And we use some movement strategies, some mindfulness, somatic strategies as well to help them get through pain. And then I focus a lot on health practitioners or first responders who, like me, are often overworked and overgiving, not because it comes from a place of necessarily the purest love, which they all do, and they have that, but also comes from a place of trying to fill that void that comes from their own trauma. And so uncovering that can help us all to not only get out of pain, but also show up more fully in the world. And so that's what I try to help people do now.
That's super awesome. And I, like you touched on a lot of topics already. And I'm sure we'll get into a lot of these different little aspects, but it also is a nice coherent storyline, right? The way that you got to what it is that you're doing. I think for me, the first thing that stood out that I kind of want to pick apart a little bit more is you sort of mentioned this Kung Fu part of your path, and then also this Tai Chi and Qigong pieces. I know that I'm not super clear on sort of the differences and some of the definitions there. So maybe we could start with just sort of teasing those different aspects apart.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So Kung Fu is, pure martial art, and it's very acrobatic and athletic. And for people who, a lot of people are probably seen Kung Fu from Bruce Lee films or, 70s films or things like that. And it's also from a Buddhist tradition. So if you kind of think about the more spiritual line, the Kung Fu actually arose in Buddhist temples. And so there's a real Buddhist tradition with that. And with that Buddhist tradition comes a lot of the Buddhist philosophies baked into the Kung Fu, which can be really good, but it can come with a lot of focus on non-attachment, which can be great, but it can also have a lot of focus on just working harder and training your body harder and kind of pushing through pain, let's say, or something like that. So what we would say, that all is under the notion of what we say is external martial arts. And so when we talk about external, we talk about something that's athletic or aggressive or outside the body and is talking about pushing through and that kind of thing. Tai Chi and the internal arts really got developed in a sibling relationship with Kung Fu, but they're more from the internal Taoist culture of China back in the day. And that culture is much more focused on longevity and internal cultivation and Epicureanism to some degree, rather than strictly the martial elements as well, or strictly as pushing through, or strictly the athletic elements. And so there's a lot more focus on energy building, on healing from the inside out, on meditation, on gaining scholarly and spiritual insight through the practice from Tai Chi and Qigong. And that's kind of how that kind of splits from what we might call external martial arts. Now, I think a lot of other people want to ask me often is like, what's the difference between Tai Chi and Qigong? Because these are two common things. And Qigong is a big umbrella that's kind of a modern word. It's a modern word for breath practice, or Qigong. I mean, Gong is the same Gong as in Kung Fu, which means like practice or like work. So you could say that Qigong is like Qi or energy or breath practice or work, right? And so that's kind of a modern term that's used to cover a whole host of breathing techniques, movement exercises, joint opening, releasing the body. I mean, it's a big umbrella term. Tai Chi is in that aspect of Qigong, and Tai Chi specifically is referring to a type of Qigong that's from a specific familial lineage that also relates to martial arts. And one of the biggest differences in a practical sense, that Qigong is focused mostly on cultivating the Qi or cultivating your health or your energy. And Tai Chi is mostly focused on mobilizing the Qi or using that vitality or that energy or that softness in application, such as martial arts.
Wow, that was a very thorough explanation, and I appreciate it. It does kind of, even in my mind, I didn't fully understand. I've heard of both, and I didn't fully understand the difference. So I appreciate that explanation. My question for you, because, I think when people think of Tai Chi or Qigong, the stereotype is like a bunch of old Asian people in a park just doing it. And my dad actually is a Tai Chi instructor, and he's like, it's not for old people, it's for young people too. It's for everyone, really, essentially. So that's basically so my question to you is really like, what do you see the benefits for doing Tai Chi or Qigong as a part of your regular daily practice for any age? And how can we get the young people into it?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And It's great. Many of my students are older as well. And, I've been doing it since I was 13. So it's obviously something that I've been passionate about my whole life. And I've known a lot of younger people who do it. And the martial arts side is often how we get the younger people involved, or how I have found it to be very exciting. And the thing is, a lot of things, the reason why you don't see a lot of younger people doing this is because those teachers in those schools, they don't know the martial elements, or they're not teaching it. And so it's just not, it's just not a common thing that you necessarily see as much. But just to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about what we talk about as health and healing and stress and anxiety, Tai Chi and Qigong have for me been the best way of removing the lid off the pressure cooker and allowing some of that stress to disperse. So when we talk about mobilizing the chi, is what I talked about earlier. You can break that down. I like to always break things down to a little bit more kind of scientific or like grounded ways to think about things. And you can just break that down to say, like, you have like anxious energy that builds over time. We all have stress. That stress gets stored in our body. We kind of are bottling that up all the time. I don't think that's a big stretch for people to understand that, right? And then you get home from work or whatever, or even if you're in college or something, there's a lot of stress, right? And it kind of feels like it's building and building all the time. And what we need ways to cope. We need ways to release some of that energy, to kind of take that lid off the pressure cooker, to let some of that steam out. And when we let that steam out, we don't have as much building up, and therefore we are not facing the same joint injuries as many people face. We don't, get old. The symptoms of getting old don't come on as soon. We don't have these psychological outbursts. We don't fall into those really severe depression, anxieties that can sometimes befall people. And I've had to heal some pretty significant things in my past. And even though some members of my family have fallen into deep depression or anxiety or addiction and things like that, I have, even throughout my healing journey, I've been able to keep myself a little bit more stable and calm and mission driven and productive by having these tools to continue to regulate myself on a day-to-day basis. So, in terms of young people, a lot of young people are interested in healing, and everybody now is starting to understand that we all have trauma. And so, if there are young people out there listening to this, what I would say is the benefit is you want to have something that can, number one, help you to relieve the buildup so that you don't have those injuries, so that those injuries heal faster, so that you don't have that chronic pain that comes on with people, and just that you feel better. And you also want to be more productive, and you can be more productive and more focused when you're not continually being torn apart by the stress, the kind of energy that's being stored in the body that is deterring you. And then as we go through our healing process, then you also need to develop the skills of introspection as well. And a lot of people just frankly haven't ever done that. And if you are somebody who hasn't really done that, then there's no problem. It's just very simple. You just start practicing a little bit every day. And, I can talk about some things maybe next that you can do. But, a lot of times when people come to me and we're working with physical healing, it's related to emotional healing and psychological healing as well. And they, it can be difficult for them to really tap into the emotional or psychological underpinnings of their pain because they haven't developed that skill of introspection. And unfortunately, that introspection is like astronomy, but that you had to build your own telescope.
Right.
And so so I would say for young people, especially people who are interested in a healing journey or spiritual journey, that you have to develop those skills of introspection. Why not develop those skills of introspection with a practice where you can also kind of shed some of that negative energy at the same time? That'd be my explanation.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense, especially, as you're talking, I was thinking about sort of my personal trajectory in terms of as each year passes, I feel less and less, and I mean, I'm probably have less testosterone pumping through my veins, but less and less like, these like kung fu elements, right? This like external driven push through things, and I move more and more towards sort of this like more calm type of energy and these sort of practices and whatnot. So it makes sense to me that that's often the way that, you know, younger people are pulled into it, or especially like men probably. But anyway, I also was curious as you were talking, and you sort of mentioned and started going into it as well, but all that sounds good. It makes sense, right? I get super stressed out. I need some way to sort of let off some of the steam. I would be curious, what are some of sort of the introductory or initial exercises that people can do to sort of maybe try some of this stuff out? And I know there's classes and stuff like that, but if there's something that somebody could do, you know, pre-class level to sort of like prepare or explore or whatever else, I'd be really curious if there's anything like that.
Definitely, yeah. And you know, what maybe we can try is we can just do a little introspective exercise right now, and I kind of can introduce you guys to a couple of things, and the listeners can kind of follow along at home. Just very brief, and we'll just cover a couple of things we can all try right now. So the first thing that I would just encourage people to do is just feel into your body, or feel into yourself, and you might even close your eyes. And you don't need to change anything for now. You're just simply noticing how you are before we do anything. And this is actually the first thing I teach people anyways, is just close your eyes and just look, just shine that light of your awareness inside. Feel how you feel in your body, feel how you feel in your heart. If you have thoughts right now that are interrupting this weird guy about this guru stuff or whatever, just notice those thoughts as well. And just wherever you're feeling now, just get a good grasp of that. And then what we're going to do is just, you might even open your eyes here, because just to shift the energies. We're just going to move quickly through a couple of things. And then what I might do is just shake out your hands. So I'm just going to have my hands here. I'm just going to shake out my hands. And we're all sitting, so anybody can do this sitting. And then I'm going to shake out my arms. Okay. And then I'm going to shake out my shoulders. And I just want to actually feel all the muscles kind of loosening in the shoulders and loosening in the neck. And I know it looks weird, but your listeners no one's watching the listeners, so it's okay. And then you just relax. But actually, you can feel those muscles loosening. And if you're standing up, go into the legs as well. Get the whole body. Just let that shake happen. Good. And then just relax and notice the difference from that. And you may start to notice kind of some tingling, or some more movement, or just like the remnants of that shaking kind of vibrating in the body. Yeah, and then so you can feel that. And then if you can feel that, then the invitation is to start to watch that. Where do you feel it? Where do you feel it the most? Does it move when you watch it? Does it change? Is there anywhere in the body that you can't feel it, or feels like kind of stuck, that you don't feel that vibration in? And for now, we're just kind of noticing that. And then sometimes people feel, especially now as we're exploring, sometimes people can feel a little bit energized, or just, shooken up a little bit, or vibrating a little bit. And so for some people that feels very alive and very energizing, and so that's great. We can connect to that if it is. And for some people that can feel kind of uncomfortable or unsettling or anxiety producing. And so that's okay. If it's anxiety producing or high energy, that's totally okay. But let's just take a few breaths and now start to just let some of that energy settle. Like you can think dirt falling to the bottom of a clean lake, still lake, the energy just settles. And the way we're going to do that is by taking a couple deep breaths from the bottom of our torso up to our shoulders. Open your mouth as you let the breath out softly. Let it settle. Let the breath itself settle from your shoulders down to your hips. And for now, we're just noticing the breath move. We're almost don't even have to imagine anything. You just can feel the breath move in your belly, in your middle torso, in your upper torso. And then as you breathe out, Just feeling the breath move out of your upper torso, your middle torso, your lower torso. Try to feel a few breaths like that. And then just like we did at the beginning, we're going to do a little check-in now. We're going to let that breath go. We're just going to do a little check-in now, just like we did at the beginning, but we're just slightly different than we did at the beginning, is I'm going to just get you to check in with your body from the top down. So you're just going to, with your mind, just feel, how do you feel in your head area, your face area? How do you feel in your neck area? Are there any sensations or anything in your shoulder area, your arms, your hands? Your chest area, you might notice the breath in your chest, your upper torso. Any emotions or thoughts that come up as well, just kind of noticing that too, just like we did at the beginning. The belly area, the hips, just noticing all the way down to the floor. And while you're noticing how you're feeling, you may also be noticing how you feel now compared to how you did when we just started. It was just 5 minutes. And then whenever you're done, you might just kind of let your eyes wander as we kind of, bring our energy back into this conversation. And so we've just done a couple of really easy things, and I can kind of go through the list of what we just did, because any one of those things can be done on their own. But kind of before I do that, I just invite you, Dr. Alice and Donovan, like, how are you feeling?
I feel a little more relaxed for sure. I feel like I became more present of my breath and my heartbeat. As well as kind of like that opening or vibration feeling. But I definitely also became present of like the tension in my back that just would not let go. And I just like that's where everything seems to be stuck, is like my back. It's like everything else feels loose and open, but just is like a blockage there. That's what it felt like.
Mm-hmm. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, because you're sharing your experience. Some people connect to your heartbeat, like you said, right? And some people are connecting to that energy, that vibration that you also mentioned. It's beautiful. And I want you to, what you shared about your back is really great, because it gives a really good example for the listeners who are probably feeling the same thing. And that's beautiful for the listeners. I want them to know, and I want you to know, that is a beautiful thing for you to feel that, because now you know where your work is.
Right.
Okay, there's something in my back that's not flowing, and
stiff.
Instead of ignoring that, which is what we mostly do,
right,
which is where that buildup happens, then now you're bringing loving awareness to it. And if you're working on one-on-one, or you go to some of my programs, people can learn how to explore those areas or move energy through those areas. But it's beautiful. But even just the awareness, okay, this is where I'm not feeling my body as much, or there's tension, there's not as flow. It's great. It's great to know that. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah. How about you, Donovan? Did something come up for you that you wanted to share, or thoughts?
Yeah, I probably had a little too much coffee this morning. I was feeling a little bit of anxiety, just in general, nothing too crazy. But I noticed that specifically the shaking part, right, of the exercise sort of shook that out of my system in a way that was much faster than something that I usually do, which is meditate, right? When I want to bring down the anxiety, I found that extra bit of sort of motion and energy helped to bring that specific thing down faster. And I was also thinking, it seemed like a nice middle ground between sort of this classic meditation of, just focus on your breathing, not moving type of deal, and something more active, but still meditative like yoga. For me, it felt like somewhere in between those two in terms of energy expenditure and whatnot. Because a lot of the times when I'm doing yoga, it is much harder than it seems like it's going to be. So
Yeah.
those are some of the thoughts that sort of came to my mind. And I think it could be a really awesome practice for people. I'd be curious what experiences you've had, but for people who I've shared, classic breath meditation with, and they find it hard to sit still that long. I think that it clicked really clear that this might be like something that'd be a great fit for them.
Exactly. And that's a beautiful thing that you said. There's a couple of beautiful things that you said that I'd love to touch base on. So number one is what you're saying was that you drink a little too much coffee this morning, right? and that's kind of funny, and we can joke about that, but that's the type of thing that your body will start to tell you when you start to listen, right? So what happened was it would be easy for you to just keep working all day, and you're not tuning into those messages that you're getting, right? But now you're like, okay, like my body's telling me I drink a little too much coffee today, and I can feel that in my system or whatever, right? And then, today that's no big deal. And for most people, that's not a big deal for today. But what will happen naturally is if you're just opening yourself to a practice like this daily, and then, that took 5 minutes. It's not like I'm asking people to want like a lot of things. If you get that same feedback, as I did in my past, got that same feedback over and over again, too much coffee every day, then it starts to kind of naturally, you start to lose motivation to drink that much coffee naturally, because you're tuning into how it feels, right? You're really feeling how it feels. So yeah, so thanks for sharing that, even though it sounded like, it's kind of funny, but it's a good thing that it's a good example of the messages that can come up. And yeah, so man, so many people, like most people who start Tai Chi, I would say there's two categories of people who start Tai Chi mostly, probably. And one of those is people who have done martial arts in the past, but they get injured or they age out or something like that. And then the other category is people who want to meditate and or have a spiritual practice, but they have a hard time sitting still that long, right? Or at all. And a lot of the reason why we have a hard time sitting still, to connect to what you said, was because anxiety, right? It's because, and I'm using anxiety in a kind of a loose way there. What I should probably say is because we're uncomfortable. It's because we're uncomfortable. But to stick with anxiety, because it's what you mentioned, moving, anxiety begs you to move, right? Everyone who's had anxiety knows that, right? And I mean, really in a not classical, necessarily physician definition, but to say just we know what we feel like when we start feeling anxious, and that is it kind of begs us to move and do stuff. So it can help to move that a little bit, but then specifically you ask somebody who's uncomfortable in their skin to sit on a cushion for 10, 20, 30 minutes, and they're just faced with how uncomfortable they feel in their skin, right? Instead of, okay, let's pair that introspective with a movement that's flowing, where we can start to learn. And then we do a lot of joint opening too. How do I learn how to move in a way that feels good, right? And then a lot of people, that's a mind-blowing proposition at the beginning, right? Yeah. Like, listeners, movement can feel good.
Yeah, I love it. Would you consider like Tai Chi or Qigong to be kind of like a meditation in motion, essentially?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, a lot of people. That's what a lot of people call it, and that's definitely, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I could absolutely see how this can. I have a clear picture on how this could benefit younger people, especially, it's great that you started at age 13, which I think probably a lot of middle school children could benefit, because like their hormones are all over the place. They're just like highly emotional, and like they're the pressure cookers that could use the release. And this would be a great way for them. And like I could see like meditation by just sitting still would be very hard for that group of individuals, or even adults, but especially like teenagers. So I could see this being really beneficial, and it's a matter of just kind of like, how do we rebrand it so young people can like be into it or something like that? Because I could absolutely see the benefit for them.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, welcome to my life now, Dr. Alice, trying to get people in. And at the same time, you also just accept, I mean, at one point, I love working with kids. I've worked with kids a
Mhm.
lot in both medical settings and also in martial arts settings, and I love it. It's one of the biggest impact, reward that I've had. So if there's ever, if somebody out there wants to bring me on to do Tai Chi with their middle school or high school kids or something like that,
Mhm.
be love to do that. On the other side, yeah, I find people, it's just one of those things that people come to when they're ready,
Yeah.
and sometimes it takes people a certain age or a certain level of experience with burnout or overwhelm
Mm.
or getting injured to learn the value of slowing down.
Mhm.
And if you don't have the value of slowing down, if you don't have a personal experience with having to physically learn the value of slowing down, it's a hard thing to sell. So, but
That makes
the good
sense.
news is it's there when people hit that wall. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I had another question that's still on topic, but not quite exactly what we were just talking about, which is you sort of mentioned this training, a more what I guess I'll say like Western medicine type of training, and
Mhm.
then also sort of pairing that with some of these other practices and ideas. And I would be curious where you found tension and where you found synergy, right? So, one example off the top of my head might be around sort of this idea of like energy and the flow of energy.
Mhm.
I would just be curious where, the distinctions and overlap that you found.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and then it's a really good question. It's an interesting area we can explore. And this is a question I'd invite you to let me know your opinions. I don't know too much about you, Doctor. Donovan, but I know you're a naturopathic doctor, right, Doctor Alice,
Yes.
and then you're working with natural cures for stress and anxiety. So you probably
Mhm.
have come up with, on this topic as well.
Yeah.
The flow of energy thing is not actually one for me that is actually big here, and that may seem counterintuitive, but I don't do really much of anything in my practice or in my classes or anything that is um, energy healing necessarily, where I am healing someone else. Okay,
Mhm.
everything that I'm doing for the most part is people are healing themselves. And then so when you're healing yourself, that means you're doing the movement or you're doing the breathing or you're doing the introspection or you're moving the feelings and you're moving the feelings that are true for you. And there's no, I don't think any conflict with that. Now, there's an explanation that we use where we say energy or chi, which I use, especially as we start getting into more Tai Chi, because it helps to understand what we're trying to do. But uh, I don't necessarily need to use that word that much when I work with clients or one-on-one or anything, because it's often a substitute for just not knowing how to explain what you're trying to explain, and that's no problem. We can use that word as a filler for just a big category of things. We do that all the time. Like a word like stress is exactly the same. But I often use words like nervous system activation, and I also use a lot of words like motor learning, right? Where you learn, your certain motor units are involved that don't need to be involved. And that's obviously there's tension there. And then sometimes we let go of that tension, then emotions come out, and then those come to certain feelings, right? So just sometimes feelings in the body. I also use a lot of words about tendons, looking for tendon and fascial strengthening. So kind of the combination between psychology and fascia training and actually talking about the actual nervous system, the actual peripheral nervous system. And then if you add the immune system into that, having this little bit of understanding of that makes it less nebulous, that kind of energy thing, from my perspective. Uh, where I think that there is tension is in when you start to think about, are you thinking about things as separate or a whole? And even if we're just thinking about just the physical training element, most people in a physical rehab or training context are treating the body as a collection of a bunch of separate things. And that's really the way science and Western philosophy approaches the subject in a lot of ways. And this can be applied to so many things, but if you think about the way we do training, most people do biceps training and legs training one day, and then triceps or whatever on another day. Think about that. You know, if you go to a physiotherapist, they're mostly treating that elbow that's injured, right? We all know this is the case when we look at the Western medical system, and many of us are trying to help to correct that with the siloed specialists. You can also apply, you know, from a Chinese medical background, you would apply that same framework to the way they look at the individual organs, to say like the organs themselves are separate, as opposed to looking at like organ systems or the way different organs work together as one system. Instead, they have completely separate breakdown of that in Chinese medicine. They completely don't separate the organs like that at all. So you know, so for me, even if I'm doing just physical training, it's always going to be how are these parts interacting as a whole. Like if somebody comes to me with knee pain, first thing I'm looking at is their hip, you know, for example. So I think that's been the biggest, and I get that you need to kind of tease these things out if you are doing research, like you're trying to research, so you need to have this deconstructionist thinking because you need to find this one variable, right? And I get that, but I think that people need to remember, especially as medical professionals, that in the theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. And in the theory of science and, you know, medical research and stuff, we want to think, you know, we can just tweak this one thing. But when you're actually working with the individual, you have to have that biopsychosocial approach. You have to have the physical movement. You know, I could go on and on about this, but the way you are moving your body is exacerbating your emotional, psychological stress or healing that. So those two are things related. So you want to have that connection too. So that's the area where I think is the most. And then and that's not even to mention the connection of all things, which is something that is missing in a lot of people's life too, that makes them search for that lack of meaning as well, which, whether it's for some cosmic reason or whether it's just something inherent to us as humans, and we have that need, doesn't matter, we have it. And so it's something that we need to kind of work with on a practical level. So that's a long answer to that, but I know I'm long-winded today, but thanks for your patience. But I would be open to either of you two. What do you think? How have you faced this in your practices?
Well, I mean, I think it is like you said, biosocial, like all of the things that we have to look at all these different factors, and it's important. And I do that in my practice. And there's all these different tools and ways to explore it for that healing journey. But I think it's a matter of just seeing what tools work best for each individual. And yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gabriel, you know, it's been such a pleasure to have you on our show, and you've imparted such incredible, useful, practical knowledge, which we really appreciate. But before we wrap up for today, is there anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. So, the kind of one thing I kind of wanted to mention, which is that, which we haven't got to, which is that a lot of people actually come to me for Tai Chi and Qigong classes are also health providers, health practitioners, oftentimes social workers, psychologists, counselors, physiotherapists, things like that. Partially because as those people, we're kind of also taking on a lot of stress, anxiety, like from our clients. You know, we're often in a position where we're trying to help them, right? And there's pressure put on us, and then we want to help them from our own sense of meaning and fulfillment as well, too, right? So that comes in. And so I'd also kind of encourage people, and Tai Chi and Qigong can be great, just like we talked about reducing that anxiety today, it can be a great thing for kind of clearing that energy to help us show up more positively for every client. And in that way, I just want to say kind of thanks to all those health providers out there who are doing that. And I know a lot of them are struggling right now. So just to put a little shout out for them. And then the other thing that I would mention is if people are interested in Tai Chi and healing, especially if you're in physical pain, or you are, like Donovan was saying, we're interested in doing more meditation, but your body hurts in the meditation, but you want to develop more presence in your life, I would suggest you do my 12-week online course called Transform Pain into Presence with Tai Chi. And that's going to be a combination of a lot of the meditation and active rehab stuff that I've learned through my learning as a kinesiologist with the fundamental, most important principles of Tai Chi that I've learned from doing that for 20 years, so that you don't have to memorize a lot of fancy things, but it kind of shortcuts your process right to really getting out of pain, getting into your body, and building less stress and a little more presence. So people are interested in that. They can check that out at courses.movehealawaken.com. So I'd appreciate if they check that out. Let me know what you think. If you are in that position I said where you're kind of overgiving or overwhelmed, don't know how to stop, in pain, especially if you're a health practitioner, then those are the most people I work with one-on-one, or you want to do some deeper work, like, if you have deeper pain, you want to do some deeper work around that, they can find all of those service offerings at coachgabrielshaw.com.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. And we will put those links in the description below. So if you want to check it out and learn from Coach Gabriel, then go click on the link and follow through and contact him. All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining us and imparting your knowledge.
I'm so grateful. Thanks for giving the venue, and thanks for continuing to do your work with helping people heal.
Thank you so much. And yes, thank you everyone for tuning in this week. We appreciate you. And if you appreciate us, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and do all the things that help spread the happiness in the world. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to subscribe, as it really helps out a lot. If you're looking for more content, there's all sorts of information over at howtohappy.com. And if you want something a little bit more condensed and concise, I've also written the book Mindscaping, which is essentially a framework for optimizing happiness. So we'll have the link there as well. And that's all I've got. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.